Was that your stuff?
What? I don't know if I'm hungry or about to shit myself. G'day and welcome to episode 1 of Guns, Hoses and Stretchers.
Oh, fuck, I wrote staging area wrong.
No, I'm joking. Are you going to ask questions straight up? So you're just going to say, welcome to episode 2, we're talking about this, and then bam, fire into
I'll shut the fuck up. G'day and welcome to episode 14 of the staging area. I'm of course Hayden Mack, and this is Simon Roylance. How are you, Simon?
Good, mate. Yourself?
I'm not too bad.
Doing well?
Yes, I am.
This is good.
A bit of a sore leg, but nah, we'll be all right.
What you do?
We've got nothing really.
Old age. I love it. Perfect.
It is old age.
It's old age.
But yes, episode 14, and we're outdoors again, out of the studio. As you can hear, the cars are passing.
Yeah, that's going to be annoying. I'm not going to lie to you. So the
should
motorbikes
not have
last
started
weekend, now we've got
this end.
cars. Probably shouldn't have filmed right next to a 100k road, but anyway, just saying.
But in this episode, we are going off what we were talking about last week in fire management, and now we're going to basically, fire management around your home. What you, as an individual, can do to prepare your house if you are in a bushfire prone area, which is coming up. Well, you'd think people would be aware of it now.
You'd hope so. You'd hope people are already preparing
Yes.
at this stage, especially after the last month or so of weather, stuff like that. You'd hope people were ready, but
Now you
It's
wanted
very
to
clear
start
somewhat.
this off with something. What was your?
I just wanted to acknowledge this morning, obviously last week we did the fire management episode. We were out in the actual bush itself in the state forest. Today we're doing it more around your house, and it just it's not a great thing, but Kevin Tolhurst, who was probably one of Australia's leading bushfire scientists. He's attached to the Melbourne University here in Victoria, and works heavily with a lot of the agencies right across the country, particularly again here in Victoria, CFA and Forest Fire Management, and all the agencies sort of in that space. Unfortunately, he passed away on Thursday. Whilst he was doing what he loved, he was teaching and helping people in the bushfire space, and unfortunately, unexpectedly, he passed away. So it's a huge loss for, I guess, not just the university, but the agencies here in Victoria and across the country, and certainly for his family. Kevin's basically been, as far as I know, been involved in the fire safety and prevention space as a fire scientist and doing that work his entire life, his entire career. So it's been a very big career. He's very well known. He's very good at what he did. And a lot of the things that we will talk about today and we spoke about last weekend, and a lot of the stuff that relates to bushfire management and fire management and prevention and the science around bushfires, a lot of that he's I guess like the godfather almost in that space here in Australia. So it's a huge loss for a lot of people, not just his family, but for the greater community. And obviously we send our respects to his family and to all the people who worked with him. It's not great. He's been a person who's created a lot of, really good programs and tools that firefighters and fire management personnel use to try and manage bushfires and to, prepare for bushfires. So it's a huge loss. There's obviously people who he worked with who will now, step up and take on that role, but regardless, it's going to be a huge loss. It's going to be felt for a long time throughout the fire community, and it's just a bit of a sad note to start the show with, but I think it's important to acknowledge him because he did such incredible work in that space, and I think it would be wrong of us to not sort of just touch on that briefly, and like I said, we send our respects to his family and to the people that he worked with closely, and we hope he rests in peace, and I hope that he knows that his work won't be forgotten, and the work that he did has helped save many people, over the journey of his life, and a lot of what he taught people, and a lot of the things that they had going on in the background will continue, obviously, to be used for many years to come, and therefore it will help save many people and ecosystems and stuff, long into the future. So I just wanted to, point that out, I guess, and touch on it. I think it's important.
Well, thank you very much for that.
No worries.
Now, we'll get into the first question here. How can homeowners assess the vulnerability of their property to bushfires, and what should they do if they live in a high-risk area?
There's, I suppose seems like a small question, but it's actually got a lot of parts to it. It's actually pretty big. So, and I guess we'll, as we're going through today, we'll cover off on this question. Is going to be kind of like the overarching for the day, or for this episode, I suppose. We're going to touch on it a number of times, but I guess the first thing, from a vulnerability perspective, understand where you live, understand the environment that you're living in. Now, what I mean by that is, obviously where we are here right now, we are in a farming community. So it's a farming community that sits right near a state forest. A state forest, probably can't see it on the camera, but it's only a couple of km north, and we can see the mountain from here. This is as I said, it's a farming community. There is some areas here that are flat and it's just grass, and then there's some hilly grassed areas, and then we have some private bush areas here in this little community as well. And it's not that far away from, a larger country or suburban sort of country town, where we then have all your normal estates and all that sort of stuff. So you've got to understand the actual environment you're living in. So that's number one. Because, if you live on top of a hill, the fire's going to react differently coming towards your property than if this property where we are right now, it's all flat. So the fire's going to be, the spread of the fire, the rate of the fire, the speed of the fire is going to be behaving differently, as opposed to the people who are just over just to the north here, where they're actually on top of hills, because we know fires travel faster. They generally double their rate of speed going uphill than what they will across flat ground. So understanding the environment you live in, are you heavily treed? Do you have bush? Is it just paddocks? Do you have main roads? As when I say the main road, and why is that important? Here we have a 100-kilometre road right behind us. It's a 2-lane 100-kilometre road. Then either side of that, there's a 2 or 3 metre, sort of nature strip or road verge. So that area there actually creates quite a large fire break for the houses that live either side of this road. Where if you go again a little bit just up here, sort of jump in your car and drive for 2 minutes, there's a single lane dirt track that's windy that goes uphill. So if you live on that road, there really is no fire break. The canopy literally crosses the road. So you've got to understand the environment you live in first. That's number one, is probably the important one, because that then allows you to develop what you do for your house. And if you live in a bushfire area, bushfire prone area, you then got to start looking at all the other things that we're going to talk about and mention today. So understanding your environment is really the key. That's the first one, because that will then give you an understanding of what is a risk, or what is potentially a risk, and what may not be a risk, or what might be a lower risk, I suppose. Because then we start looking at things like driveway access, vehicle access. You and I both know tankers. Say if we use Victoria as an example, but it's no different right across the country. Our tankers across the country are fairly similar sizes these days. We've got some little variants, but they're fairly similar sizes. One of the big issues we see as firefighters is coming in your driveway.
Yeah.
Is it wide enough? Fire trucks, they're pretty wide, they're pretty large, they're quite long, or they're reasonably long. They're very high, especially the newer model fire trucks that are coming out. They're very high. So if you have, again, knowing your environment, if you have a driveway that is not clear and it doesn't fit fire trucks, then they're going to struggle to get into your property, and therefore they may not come in to defend the property, or whatever it may be, if they think it's going to be a risk where they could be trapped, or they're going to damage their trucks getting in there. So it's really important to understand that aspect of your environment. Knowing your water sources, again, that's another big part of knowing your environment. Do you have easy, accessible water that both yourself and the fire services could use to potentially defend your house, or to be able to put out enough spot fires and things after the main fire front's gone through or as they're coming through, whatever it may be. So obviously we really don't want and don't encourage people, if you've got a fire front coming and you're starting to get bushfires dropping around your house, we really don't encourage you to be out there at that time. You should be, if you are a person who's going to stay and defend your property, certainly when those spot fires start to appear, you should probably be going inside and taking shelter, because you're now in a very dangerous situation. And then once that fire front passes, you go out and you start mopping up all those burning areas. So you want to have a good water source, and if you don't have that, it's going to be very difficult for you or the fire services to defend your property. So again, knowing the environment. Do you have a water supply that comes from mains pressure out here where we are? There is no mains pressure. Everything is tank water out here. So how big are your tanks? What type of tanks do you have? Are they filled up? Do you get them filled up prior to the fire season, or do you just hope to God they're going to have water in them? Do you have a dam? If you have a dam, is it easily accessible by fire trucks to be able to get down into that dam to draft the water out if they need to? Or do you have a pump set up on your dam, then you've got a hose running to your property or whatever it may be? How does that look like? So that's what we talk about when you're knowing your environment. All those different sort of aspects is really important when you live in a bushfire prone area. And then there's the actual, I guess, preparing your house and the things around your house that then feeds into that, knowing your environment and understanding the conditions of your home itself.
All right. Next question.
Flies killing me.
The bloody flies.
Told you it was going to annoy me.
It's not the best going outside, is it?
No. It's good.
But, all right, so what are the key steps individuals and families should take when preparing their homes for the bushfire season?
So, I guess the first one, and we'll touch on this one a bit later on probably, we certainly will, but you want to have some kind of plan. And you want that plan to be written, preferably, and you want everybody in your household to know what that plan is. Now, that plan shouldn't just be for the bushfire season, it should be all year round. If we have an emergency at home, if the house catches fire, if there's a gas leak, whatever it may be, it's a nice car. You should have that sort of plan all year round. But certainly from a bushfire perspective, we then have to add in some extra things to our plan, because if we are going to leave, then we need to know which way we're going to leave, and are those roads going to be, okay for us to leave on, all that sort of stuff. So that gets tied into it. We'll talk a bit more about that later on, because I think that's something we should talk about towards the end, because it's really important to talk about what that plan should look like and some of the other things in that space. Outside of that, the next thing is as a family, and this is where I say to people all the time, and I've had this conversation with so many community members in the past, mum and dad, they're like, oh no, we built the plan, and the kids we'll tell them what to do. No, your kids need to be a part of that plan. You need to actually do this, the building of this plan and the understanding of the plan. Your kids should be with you at the time. If they're old enough to understand what's going on, then they should be with you, so that when things go wrong, when you may need to enact this plan, touch wood, fingers crossed you don't have to, but if you have to do it, the kids aren't just following your direction, they know what's expected of them. And you should potentially test that plan in the lead up to the bushfire season. So one of the ways that we do that, other than sitting down and physically writing a plan, which we'll speak about later, is get outside, as we are today, which we're about to do, and walk around your property as a family and have a look at all the things that you think may be a risk, all the trees that you have, the garden beds that you have, look at your water sources, look at your driveway, look at your connectivity to roads. Think about and have a look at your neighbours' properties. What are they potentially doing, or are they posing a risk to you, and is there something you might be able to do about it on your property? Or do you need to have a conversation with them and say, hey, look, you're kind of putting us at risk. Are you able to put a fire break in, or whatever it may be? So physically getting outside and visually and physically walking around and touching things and looking at what may be a risk to your house is where you start your plan from. And then as you identify things, you work out what it is that you need to do to combat those problems that you've come up against. There is some really small things that people don't think about that, from a firefighter's point of view, when we see them pulling into somebody's driveway, or even just driving around in general and looking at people, the state of people's properties as we're heading towards a fire season ourselves, you see some properties, you go, geez, I hope we don't get a fire there, because it's always, that property always looks like this, and that's going to cause us trouble, and it's going to cause them trouble. And some of the things that cause people trouble are really basic things, and they're things that people just, they don't have enough knowledge or understanding around, so therefore they allow that stuff to stay there, and they think, oh, this is great though, this has been like this for 20 years, but it's actually a big problem if you get a fire in that area, which again we'll touch on probably now, I guess.
Yep,
if you
let's
want to.
go through that now.
So we'll go through that sort of, some of the stuff now anyway. So one of the first ones, one of the big ones we see with houses is, obviously if we're in the country, you love to have your gardens, you love the environment, and that's kind of why a lot of people move out to the country. Peace, quiet, environment, being able to run free, have animals, do all that sort of stuff. Gardens are a big one. You see many gardens on big properties, and that's what a lot of people, why they buy land. It's certainly why I have land where I live, because I wanted to, I want to be able to build gardens and have all those sorts of things. But one of the big issues with gardens is putting trees right up against houses. So even just your plants or something that you class as a plant that can, get quite bushy and may dry out during summer, even if it is, if it's drought tolerant or whatever, but they can dry out, they can become a risk to your house if there's a fire coming through. And in particular, where we see that risk probably happening more often than not is people putting tan bark or mulch into the garden bed, which is right up against the house. And as we get fires approaching, believe it or not, many fires that burn down during bushfires don't burn down from the fire front. A lot of them burn down from the embers, from the spot fires, either prior to the fire front getting there or after the fire front has passed and the spot fires are sitting there burning away, trickling away. People think everything's okay, the fire's gone past, and then 2 hours later their house is on fire because a spot fire that they didn't think about or didn't plan for or didn't see has just been slowly burning away, and then bang, off it goes, and you lose your house. We saw that a lot during the Black Saturday fires on the fire front. Many of the houses we saw catching fire or burning down, either burnt down before the fire front got there because the spot fires were raining down. They were literally raining down, as you would no doubt remember. So the houses were catching fire long before the fire front came, and we certainly saw many houses catching fire, in some cases, hours after the main fire front went through, because spot fires had got up into the roofs, up into the eaves, and they were just slowly trickling and burning along. There was nobody there, obviously, with the houses, or some people's houses burnt down when they were there. By the time they realised that their house was on fire, it was too late, and there was no resources available to get there to help them put their houses out. So garden beds are a big one, because the embers get into the mulch, and the mulch can sit there and smoulder for hours and hours, and then it may catch fire at some point. And if there's plants and things in it that are dried out, they're obviously going to catch fire. If they're right up against the house, as we can see sort of here, they could quite easily spread to the house very quickly. So mulch garden beds are a big one. How do you stop that from happening? It's a great question. There is a lot of material out there, and I think I know certainly here CFA do in Victoria, and I'm sure the other states do as well. CFA used to have a really good book, and I'm pretty sure it's still available on their website, that you can download that says Landscaping for Bushfires. And it actually steps you through ways that you can landscape is that your five-pager? Yeah, it's burning down already. It is. There you go. See, it's an alert. Love it. So we can, if you get books like that, we can actually show you how to landscape your properties for bushfire. So what's the best plants to use, how to create garden beds if you want the garden beds close to your house. How do you create them, but in ways that is going to hopefully help you if a fire comes through.
Yep. So
there's those sorts of books that are available, and there's other, just general landscaping books can also quite often have areas in there that talks about bushfire prone areas and things to do. So that's a good one. The next one is things like this. Like, again, we're in the...
I'll move the camera around.
We're going to move the camera around for this one? Cool. But yeah, this is, again, just another, sort of example. Doesn't happen everywhere. Where we've got our suburbs, I suppose, most people are connected to gas, and it's obviously, sort of under the road, comes up into their house and away they go. Where we're out here in the country environments, quite often the landholders have a gas bottle at the front of their house. Now, it might be a small gas bottle. This is sort of probably like a medium-sized gas bottle. You might have a larger gas bullet, or you might have multiple smaller gas bullets attached to your house, or tanks attached to your house or near your house. perfect example is this. We've got a tank here. This tank does have gas in it, so this is the tank that is used by the house where we're recording today. You have a look at this, and we've got vegetation right next to the gas tank. Now, yep, obviously, if we get a leak in this gas tank during that potential fire, it's going to be problematic because we've got vegetation in it, which could quite easily ignite the vapor coming from the gas. But the other thing is, by having vegetation like this right up against the gas tank, if we do have a fire coming through, it's going to create, when this vegetation catches fire, there's going to be a lot of heat being pushed onto this particular cylinder. So again, that's where we might have some kind of issue with her potentially venting or something similar to that, and causing a whole heap of drama for these property owners. Now, this gas tank is not too far away from the corner of the house. It's probably 6 metres roughly, give or take. Probably a bit shy of 6 metres. Again, if this was a bushfire scenario and that happened to catch fire, we could see quite a significant issue if this tank actually happens to explode. So being able to clean up around this tank, both the grass, you can see the grass is actually pretty low around the tank, which is pretty good, but there is a lot of debris on the ground from this tree, and the tree itself is literally kind of starting to wrap around the tank, and then there's another tree right next to it. So, and both of these trees would go in a heartbeat if there was a fire. If we have dry conditions, which we're going to get in the next couple of weeks, it wouldn't take much for these two trees to catch fire if we had embers coming in or direct flame contact from a fire front. So not ideal. Preferably want to try and trim this tree back, even remove the tree altogether if you can. Possibly even, you'd possibly even remove this wooden sort of frame here. This wooden frame doesn't really seem to be doing anything. It just seems to be sitting there. It'd be quite easy to knock that out and remove it, so at least that timber's not right up against it. There's a little wooden sort of seat thing here. I'm not sure why that's there, but it's there. Again, removing something like that would certainly assist in keeping fire away from this particular tank. If you could, you remove the trees. If you can't remove the trees, maybe move the gas bottle and put it somewhere else. There's other areas on this property that I can see a gas bottle would be probably more suited to be in. But that's one of the things that we've picked up on this property so far. I think we'll go have a look at the other couple of things now. Yeah. All right, so next part on this particular property, things that I guess are a bit concerning, or concern me anyway. We're underneath, I guess, like a bit of a carport here, which actually attaches to a shed, just like an out sort of shed, and then that shed actually attaches to the structure of this house. So under this carport, there's a whole heap of material and what we would class as fuel, which could quite readily and quite easily catch fire if embers got in here or if a fire front come through. So obviously there's some stacked up timber here. Obviously I don't know what it's for, but there's stacked up timber here. This timber's pretty dry. Looks like it's been here for a while. Probably shouldn't stand on it in case a snake comes out and tries to grab me, but there's...
Don't think it'll grab you.
Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah. So yeah, we've got the timber here. Obviously, timber like this, be quite easy for embers to drop in anywhere in this timber and smoulder away potentially. And this could be a scenario where hours later we get a fire in this carport that then spreads to the house quite easily, because it has the ability to spread to other material here. So we've got a couple of, looks like some eskies here, which obviously plastic's not great when they catch fire and can help spread. There's some tyres stacked up right behind that. Anyone who knows anything about tyres knows they burn really well and quite easily when they get going, and can become a bit of a problem, especially with the toxins that come off them. There's some tarps here. Then we've got stuff stacked right up against this structure, and a fire getting into this material here and getting over there is going to happen very quickly. So we've got material stacked up here. There's timber in here. There's some steel. Obviously, we've got long green grass at the moment. If this was obviously left and becomes dry, then we've got going to have long dry grass there. The bit that concerns me is all this stuff can very easily catch fire. It's stuff that burns quite readily when something, or when it's introduced to flame or whatever it may be. And then it's stacked right up against this structure. So this structure wouldn't take much to catch fire. We know inside this shed there is chemicals and a whole heap of other types of fuels. There's petrol in there, all sorts of things in here that are going to continue to allow that fire to get quite large. And as I said, it's directly attached to the house, so it wouldn't take much for this fire, a small fire getting in here, to then potentially burn this house down in the right conditions if we didn't have people here defending the house. If fire services couldn't get in, if it's a large fire, there may not be the resources available to immediately get here. So this house itself will be under significant risk if a fire was to take hold in this area.
All right, let's go to the next spot.
Sounds good, let's do it. Action. We need to get one of those. Fucking birds just took off. Sorry, birds. Right, so next little bit on this property. It's not too bad, but I guess I saw it and wanted to touch on this because it's really important. Again, out here where we are now, there's no permanent water supply, so everything's done by water tanks. And in some cases, you know, for feeding of animals and things, there's dams and stuff. This property also has a small dam. But we've got water tanks here. Now, there's obviously all different ways you can have your water tanks set up and different types of tanks. You can have your poly tanks like these ones are. You can have your steel water tanks or your galvanised water tanks. Sometimes people have the water tanks put underground. Just depends. Obviously depends on what the makeup is of the property itself. But one of the things that we see often as firefighters, a couple of things that are dangerous when it comes to tanks. And number one is, and this isn't related to the property itself, but number one is we do see every year, particularly when we have major fires, so maybe more, you know, every 5 or so years, we always seem to have these issues where people think that when the fire's coming and they get concerned that their house is going to burn down, they go and jump in their water tanks because they think that that's going to be the best place to be because there's water in there. It's really not. It's actually quite dangerous. We have seen, there's recorded cases where people have jumped into their water tanks and unfortunately they have been killed because they went into the water tank. Maybe through drowning, maybe because they've effectively been boiled with inside the tank, especially the steel ones. There's a whole heap of different reasons why people have been injured or killed jumping into water tanks when fires are coming. So we certainly don't recommend that, and you should never have that in your plan. It shouldn't be anything, you should never be doing that with your water tanks at all. When it comes to the defendability of your water tanks or things that you can do to keep them safe, quite often we see these poly tanks during a fire, they will burn. At the end of the day, they are plastic, and even though they've got water inside them, the heat on the outside is what is going to cause these tanks to potentially melt and then fall apart. So some of the things you can do, keep the grass low around your tank. This is pretty good here. The grass is fairly low around this tank, and actually where I'm standing, yep, sure there is some dry grass that's come through it. It's been sprayed recently. There is rock under here as well. So it's a pretty sturdy base, but if we had long grass here, which we often see long grass up against tanks, you're going to allow that fire to hit the tank and potentially cause it to melt. And then you're going to lose all your water, which stops you from having the ability, and the fire brigade from having the ability to then potentially defend your home or help you with spot fires. Timber, we often see piles, just like we were looking at before, piles of timber stacked up against tanks. Again, the fire gets in there, it's going to melt your tank. Your tank will be absolutely useless at that point because it's going to be getting direct flame on the outside, not where the water is on the inside, and these tanks are not designed to have direct flame hitting them. So you need to be aware of stacking things around your tanks. If you've got your tanks in a heavily treed area, again, you're going to have issues with, if the trees come down, it may go through your water tank. If the tree catches fire, it then may spread to your water tank. So you want to try and keep your tanks, whenever you can, as far away from as much vegetation as possible. If you can give them a nice, good, solid grounding to try and keep the grass and the flame away from the tank, that is always a great option. If you can put a concrete base down or a rock base down and then maintain that rock base as much as you can so that grass doesn't come through. All of those things are great options for your water tanks. The other thing that you want to think about with your water tanks, and I'll highly encourage this no matter where you are in the country, if you have got water tanks like this and they're quite large on your property, regardless if you're planning on staying and defending your property during a bushfire, or if your plan is to leave long before a fire comes, or your plan is to evacuate once you're advised to evacuate by the emergency services, your tanks may be really valuable to the fire services to defend your property when you're not here, or maybe to defend your neighbour's property. So it's always a really good idea to speak with your local fire brigade, find out what tank fittings they need on your tanks so that if they pull up, they can easily access your water and take your water to defend your property or other properties. Now, again, I'm speaking here in Victoria. I'm not sure about the other states, but here in Victoria, the fire service and the government have a rehabilitation process, I guess you would call it, where if fire trucks take water from tanks, they actually record where they took it from and how much they took it from, and the government will actually refill your tank at some point in the coming days, because the fire brigade took it for fire purposes. So don't be concerned about getting those fittings for your tank for the fire brigade. If they come and take it, they will replenish the water within the coming days when they can. A water cutter will come and refill that tank for you. So if you can help the fire services out by having a connection for them to be able to connect into, it's a really good idea, and then get your fitting put on there so that they can defend your property or your neighbour's property at any time.
So now, I've got another question for you.
I like questions.
Could you explain the concept of defendable space and why is it important in bushfire preparedness?
In bushfire, are you thinking about lunch
So
again?
I wrote this.
Yeah, clearly you did. And, in the bushfire context. So defendable space, I guess the easiest way to explain it for, I guess, people who might be looking at preparing their properties and should be looking at preparing their properties, it's really the space that you have in and around your home that would be easy for you and the fire service to defend if a fire came through. So just like we've spoken about earlier, and we'll speak about a couple of other things shortly, it's about that area around your house that is maintained, looked after. If a fire comes through, it's going to be hard for a fire to impact that area, and it's going to make it easy for you and the fire services to move around before, during and after a fire to protect your property, to be able to put out embers, to be able to, if there is actually physical fire there on the ground, in the grass, they could potentially, combat that fire and keep it away from your house, from your structures, all those sorts of things. So it's a defendable space that will slow down or stop fire from being able to get in there. And then if it does happen to get in there, that you can easily combat it without any huge issues, and it's not going to, you're not going to have lots of vegetation and things, right up against your house burning, all that sort of stuff. So that's what they mean by defendable space.
Okay. So then next question is, if I can say it correctly, what are some of the most effective strategies for protecting homes from ember attacks during a bushfire?
Was it effective or strategies you were going to have problems with?
On.
Saying.
I had to read that again. I go, what?
Straight under the bus.
Hang on, I didn't even know my own question then.
I know. It's like, I'm going to have trouble
Don't
saying
ask
this.
follow-up
Which
questions.
one was the problem?
Just go with the fucking program.
All right, sorry, mate. Hey, you said the F word already. I haven't said it all morning so far. Now you throw me under the bus with that.
Actually, in the last episode.
Yeah, you ruined it at the end.
No, not at the end. I did edit in that where you found the nappy.
Oh, yeah, I heard that bit, yeah. Weirdo. All right.
Do you need that question again?
No, back to your question. So how do we basically look after our properties from ember and spot fire attack? So if we use the terminology, ember attack is probably better, because spot fire is what occurs after ember lands somewhere. So again, as we said earlier, long grass around your house, clumps of timber, things that embers can, you got to think embers can be really small. I'm just trying to look on the floor here and going, what could an ember be? It's going to be hard to see on the camera, but if that was burning, and that's going to be really hard to see on the camera, but that is tiny, like that's smaller than a 5-cent piece. But if that was on fire, that could, in the right conditions, be all that's needed. That's an ember. That's all that is needed to potentially cause a fire on your property, right? Under the right conditions. And we see this all the time. We see this every summer. We saw it down in Gippsland last weekend. Literally, I guess we haven't really spoken about it, but as we were filming the other day, we were talking about there was fire danger down in Gippsland on that weekend, and some significant bushfires kicked off, and we had evacuation orders and watch and act orders put out, and there was, as we were filming, strike teams from all over Victoria were being mobilised and sent there in a hurry to help defend communities. So it just sort of proved, I guess, that the space we're in at the moment with our bushfire season. And then they got hit by floods, which we also mentioned that could happen. They got hit by floods, and there's been evacuation orders down there for the floods now. So there's a lot going on. But during those fires, they had a lot of ember attack. They had a lot of spot fires occurring. We've had bushfires in New South Wales at the same time this week, where bushfires, where embers and spot fires became a huge drama for the fire services due to the conditions. So those little embers can get in anywhere. So, you know, they'll get into the grass, they'll allow the grass to catch fire well ahead of, you know, of the main fire front. They will get into your timber piles and smoulder potentially for hours before they actually ignite. They'll get in amongst the rubbish and your bins and paper and anything that they can get in amongst, they will get into. Two of the areas where we do see them, or three of the areas where we see it happening a lot, other than timber piles, is your garden beds, where you've got your mulch and your stuff like that. In the holes in your house, so if you have holes in your roof or you have holes in your structure that you know about, embers will get in there and they will go inside the wall and they can potentially fester inside the walls or smoulder inside the walls for hours and then eventually catch fire. They'll certainly get up into your roof space if you've got holes. If there's, you know, cavities that they can get into on the roof, they will get in there. And again, they get inside the roof, they generally land on the insulation and they smoulder in the insulation for hours, and then bang, they catch fire. And when they do, it spreads very quickly through the roof and then you lose the house. The other area we see it happening quite often is up on your roof where you've got your gutters. Mm-hmm. So people who've got gutters and they've got a lot of trees, this property here has a lot of trees to the north of the structure, right near the structure, and the roof line is covered with leaf litter. There is leaves everywhere. There's hundreds of them up on that roof that would just be, you know, a perfect scenario for an ember to get in there, land on that roof. Those embers, the leaves catch fire along that gutter, and then it gets up underneath the eaves into the roof again, and before you know it, the roof's well and truly on fire. So keeping those things around the house is one thing you want to get rid of. If there's ways of plugging up holes on roofs and around your house, you know, my advice is talk to somebody like a builder or someone in that space to say, can we plug these things up before you go do it? Because there may be a reason why you have those gaps, ventilation, whatever it may be. Particularly up on your roof where you got your gutter, clean them out regularly during summer. Make sure you do that safely. If you're going to get up on your roof or up on a ladder and clean your gutters out, make sure you have somebody else with you who's purely there's like a bit of a spotter to make sure that you're okay up on that roof. And if you can, I would highly suggest that you buy the appropriate safety equipment to go up on your roof to do that, so that if you do fall, you're caught by some kind of lanyard or harness or whatever it may be. Because we do see people falling seriously injured every year in preparation periods from falling off ladders, going up on roofs. And then you've got gutter guard. Gutter guards are pretty good. Now, there's lots of different versions or variants of gutter guard. The ones where I've seen they work the best is certainly the metal gutter guard. You can buy this stuff from Bunnings, most hardware retailers sell gutter guard these days. You can buy it online, all that sort of stuff. I prefer the metal mesh. That's what I certainly use. You get up there and generally it hooks in over the top of your gutter, and then it'll push up underneath your roof. Or if you've got a Colorbond roof or a steel roof or whatever it is, sometimes you can just screw them in, or they have these little tacks that you can use. And that basically covers your gutter so rain can get in and continue to go into your downpipes and into your tanks and wherever it may be. But it stops the leaves from being able to get clogged up inside your gutters. And it also makes it easier when you're trying to clean your gutter. You basically just push it all off and it comes out instead of you trying to dig in, and you know it doesn't allow for it to get right up underneath the eaves. It basically sits on top of the roof and you can just push it off. You can blow it off, whatever you need to do. So gutter guards are really good. They're very easy to install. There is people who will install it for you. It's certainly something that, you know, I've done in the past with my businesses, and we offer that service now where we go and we can install that for people. So there's people out there who will install it for you, but realistically it's quite easy to do yourself. If you're a person who's reasonably handy, you can do it yourself. Okay. So that's good.
Next question is, are there specific building materials or design features that can make a home more fire resistant? You mentioned before, holes. Obviously, you can clog holes up. Obviously, putting in that gutter guard. Anything else that...
I mean, I guess there is building materials that are better.
Asbestos.
No.
No, okay, yeah.
Let's not go down that path. How many times have you been to a fire and had to take your gear off because of asbestos? You should know better than that.
Never.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I've done it heaps of times.
I know.
It's frustrating.
I was there when you...
I was going to say, you were at the house fire in Kilmore. Anyway.
No, not that one.
Not that one, no.
The one that you hit the driving into the driveway.
Shut up about that. We don't talk about how I crashed a new fire truck when some lady tried to squeeze between me and a gate, and I tried to save her life and got suspended from driving for 3 months. But anyway, let's not go there. It's another story. That's a around the fire story. We'll talk about those ones another day. But there is building materials you can use that are better when building houses and constructing things around your property. That they're a little bit more fire prone, I guess. So they're not fire prone, but they're a bit more better standing or upstanding against fire and embers and things like that. Certainly these days, if you're building a new home, almost regardless where it is, probably not as much in the suburbs, but certainly in country areas. And when I say country, it doesn't have to be that country. Like suburban areas where we are filming today, this is technically a suburban council, and
metropolitan.
It's metropolitan,
Yeah.
and that affects this area here, and it affects some of the towns just to the sort of south of where we are as well, and they're fairly built up towns. But where you have a potential risk of bushfire, grass fire, whatever it may be, you often have to get a BAL, a bushfire attack level assessment, conducted on a property where you're requesting to get a building permit for. In that BAL, they're generally done by building, not necessarily, you could call them building inspectors, I guess. They are building inspectors. They're generally private building inspectors that will come and do it for you. They come out to have a look at your property, and they measure that, sort of look at where you want your house to be, and they use lasers and things, and they measure the vegetation around you, and they have a look at it and go, well, if a fire came through here, what would the bushfire attack level be? And you get a number. It's a gradient number, and they give you a number. And if you're at the lower end of that number, it's really good because you can pretty much just build a normal house and everything's okay. If you're at that higher, and if you're at that high risk area, they will then say, well, your number's this, and if you go and look what that number means in the building codes and talk to your builder, you will have to pay a lot more money to build your house there, because you're going to have to use these materials that are better standing against bushfire, and you might need to have triple glazed windows and all these other things happening during your build to make it better protected against a bushfire, so to speak. So there is materials out there, and again, when it comes to that designing process, if you're looking at building building a house and you're in an area where there is a BAL, you really want to be having a good conversation or a good chat to the architect and the designers to have a look at ways that you can make it more, fireproof or better standing against fire, because you can never really make them 100% fireproof, but better standing. And then certainly, as I mentioned earlier, go and get those books about landscaping your property and use those books, and talk to people like the fire brigade and stuff like that. They have staff in those organisations who will come out and help you with these sorts of things, or talk to you about these things, talk you through it, and design the outside of your property. The outside design of your property, your landscaping, is just as important as how you build the house and the materials you use to build your house, because it's going to potentially slow down a fire, or at least potentially stop a large spread of fire than almost anything else, really. Next.
Now, the next question is, are there common mistakes or misconceptions people have about preparing their homes for bushfires that you'd like to address?
Probably the biggest one, I think. It's probably two that kind of feed into each other. The first one is, it'll never happen to me.
Yeah.
I've lived here 20 years, property's been the same for 20 years, and from a firefighter's perspective, we might look at your property and go, Jesus Christ, I'm not going in there. But you think it's okay, because for 20 years nothing's happened. That will run out eventually. Eventually that luck is gonna run out. It's Murphy's Law, call it what you want to call it. It's gonna run out at some point. So you can't have that mentality. You can't have that it's never happened to me before, it's never gonna happen, or it's been like that for 20 years and why should I do it now? You should do it now, because it could happen every year. Every year, particularly if you live in a bushfire prone area, every year may be that year. So you need to be prepared to do that. The next one is, I guess the common mistakes is, I don't know where to start. I can't get any help. So I don't really know what I'm looking at. So I just won't do it. There's a lot of people out there that will help you. There's a lot of documents that will help you if you go online. There's lots of things you can find online that can help you that are specific to Australia and planning for bushfire or living in bushfire-prone areas. And again, as I said, the agencies, the fire agencies right across this country, they have people who look at this stuff specifically every single day, and they create documentation for the community. They create a lot of stuff for the community that you can go and download and get. Go to your bushfire, big one, huge one, bushfire community meetings. Bushfire community meetings, they happen almost every year in bushfire-prone areas. Certainly here in Victoria. Again, I don't want to say what the other states do, but I know that they do these things because I've seen them popping up on my Facebook lately. But they certainly happen. One of the things that used to frustrate me is, where the station we used to both be in, as every year went on, those community meetings got smaller and smaller. People are just like, oh yeah, but I went last year, so I don't need to go again this year. Is it going to kill you to go for an hour? Like, is it really going to kill you to go an hour every year to talk to the local firefighters, to talk to the community engagement people and find out what potentially new risks are available or what's there?
But what I can remember from those days, the worst was after the fact that a fire came through.
Then
next year,
everyone would come.
Everyone would
come. Yeah, 100%. You get a fire locally, might not even be in that area, but you get one sort of locally that they know about. And the next year, there'd be 100 people at the meeting.
Yeah.
But then the following year, there'd be 5 people, and that's it. And it's really frustrating because it's like, every year to come together from, normally they only go for like an hour. To come together for an hour once a year to talk to the fire services and the experts about bushfire safety and their concerns about the weather. And they'll tell you what their concerns are that year. Every year there might be a slightly different concern. Maybe the weather's different. Maybe they've had changes in, maybe there's been more building in the community. So now there's concern around that building or whatever it may be, traffic and whatever else. So there's always something new that they will teach you. But going on for an hour is really not much, and it will give you that prompt to, it's time to get ready. Normally these meetings normally start when the fire services are getting to a point where they're really starting to concern now, and they really want you to start taking action to clean up and clear your properties. So it's always a good thing to go to. Again, one of the things I used to hate is you'd see like the first year, there'd be someone there that you hadn't seen before and you go talking to them, oh yeah, we just moved in 6 months ago. And it's like, oh great, they've brought the kids down. Everyone's like, oh yeah, love this is great. It's fantastic. Thanks for all the stuff. 12 months later, you go past that person's house and it's like the worst house in the street when it comes to fire protection. And when you have that meeting that year, they're not there because they came the first year and they don't need to come back now. So that sort of stuff gets quite frustrating for firefighters and for the, even for the people in the community, it gets frustrating because there is people in streets where they go, 4 or 5 houses do really well, and then there's that one person in the street that's actually going to be the risk to everybody else because that person doesn't care. Yes. So there's those sorts of things. Having this expectation that because you have insurance, then 100% insurance is going to cover you when there's a fire. Look, to a certain degree, that's probably true, but if the insurance company can prove that you hadn't prepared your house and you hadn't looked after your house and it was really a fire trap, you may have some issues there. I'm not saying you definitely will. I don't want to speak from a legal perspective on that, but I certainly know of cases where people have, rang up their insurance company and said, oh, my house burnt down during a bushfire, and they've seen inspectors or investigators out there to have a look at it because maybe they're doing a couple of houses in that area, and they go to this one particular house and they go, yeah, but it's clear you had piles of wood up against your house and you had, it was very clear you had long grass here because they can see it. The grass doesn't always completely burn to a moonscape, but they'll see the long grass that's laid over that, didn't quite catch fire or whatever, or maybe it was knocked down by a fire truck at some point. They'll look at it and go, well, you haven't actually prepared your house for this. If anything, you've made it a fire trap, and you can then have some legal issues in that space. So just thinking that because you've got insurance, it's going to solve everything if you catch fire, that's not necessarily correct. So people need to be aware of that. That's probably about it, really. They're probably the big ones, I reckon, that I see and hear about a fair bit. Yeah.
All right, so the next question is, what role do fire breaks and vegetation management play in creating a safer environment around homes?
So if I go vegetation management first, vegetation management around your house is crucial if you live in a bushfire-prone area or you have land. And when we say land, it doesn't have to be very big land, like an acre is enough to be a problem during a bushfire. You know, even half an acre is enough to be a problem during a bushfire period. If you have a look at, you know, Black Saturday, the 2003 Canberra fires, the Sydney fires in the early 90s, the 1920 fires. When I say 1920, the 2019, 2020 fires. We don't want to confuse that again.
First time I heard that.
We don't want to get that confusion going
Back
again.
in 1920,
Yeah,
boy.
back when we had the water cart and the horse. If we look at the 2019, 2020 fires, any major fire period where fires have come into suburbs, we've lost houses that are in suburban areas where you wouldn't think you would lose houses, but we do, because if the right conditions, embers, all those sorts of things, garden beds, all that sort of stuff, even the suburbs can be hit quite hard by bushfire. So that's why, again, here in Victoria, the CFA and Fire Rescue Victoria and Forest Fire Management Victoria, the last few years now, they've been really specific on telling people in suburban areas, if you have a bushfire heading towards you, move back 2 streets to protect yourself. Yes. Move you and your family back 2 streets if you don't want to stay in your house. Reality is staying in your house is probably going to be safer from that grass fire perspective in the suburbs, but move back 2 streets if you have to, if it's going to be clearer for you. So suburbs, doesn't matter how big your house is, there can be issues there. I remember years ago going to a fire up north on a strike team, and we were in a suburban area, and a house was severely damaged because that gentleman who lived there had a very large hedge, quite a high hedge, was almost higher than the roof of his house, running right along the side of his house. On the outside, as they always do, it was really green. You stuck your hand on the inside, it was dry as a bone, like you could snap it. It was incredible. An ember got in there, burnt that hedge, and both his house and the neighbour's house both received significant damage. I think they actually ended up getting knocked down, like they were severely damaged from that hedge, and that was in a suburban area. So, it doesn't matter how big your property is, if there's vegetation there that the fire can latch onto and get to, it's going to do it if it's in the right circumstances. So vegetation management is absolutely crucial no matter where you live. In Australia, if you've got vegetation, there's a possibility it could catch fire at some point. So you need to be mindful of that. The next part of that, fire breaks. Fire breaks play a huge part in, I'm not going to say stopping fires because that would be completely incorrect. Fire breaks don't stop fires. They certainly slow fires down. They can stop fires if the conditions are right at the time and we have the right resources on that fire break and we've done some preparation prior to knowing the fire was coming. It can stop them, but if it's a real bad day, the reality is it slows them down because we get those embers. Embers go up in the air with the smoke and they can travel some distance. We've had recordings here in Victoria. I'm not sure if these have ever been proven, but there's certainly been stories from firefighters and from different people that we've had embers that have travelled close to 50 kilometres in really bad conditions and then started fires. Certainly, we know it happens 1 kilometre, 2 kilometres, 3 kilometres in front of a fire, and it will happen 5, 10, 20, 30 metres in front of a fire, and that can be enough to cause that's enough for a fire to jump a fire break. So fire breaks are really important though, both in the forested areas and on your properties. Up against roadsides in particular is really good because the firefighters can try and make a stand by using the road for them to be on. And if we've got fire breaks either side, it gives them like a good 50, 60 metres. So at least the fire front itself hopefully won't jump that road because that would be probably unlikely. Then they've just got to worry about the embers. And if they just have to worry about the embers and they can kind of control those embers, then they may have a chance of stopping that fire on a fire break. So they are crucial. They are really important. I would certainly, if you're a landowner who thinks you can put a fire break in or you're thinking about putting a fire break in, again, talk to the fire agencies about the best way of doing that on the land that you have, and they may be able to even assist you in that process. They're not going to come and do the work, but sometimes there's grants and things available that you can use to get some of that work done, and you can be a part of, some programs and stuff. So if you've got a lot of vegetation on your property and you think that fire breaks is going to be a way to go, definitely reach out to them, have a chat. Again, you can talk to, there's private consultants that will come out and talk to you about this stuff as well. So if you're willing to pay them, they'll come out and have a chat to you about where they think you should put fire breaks in and how to do it. And there's different methods of creating fire breaks dependent on the vegetation and what's happening around your property. So they're definitely crucial. They're definitely needed, for sure. I feel like I'm on a quiz show.
Who wants to be a dickhead?
Whoa! Who wants to be an arsonist would have been a better name for your show, but fuck, whatever. All right, let's go with dickhead. Jesus. See that? Oh,
What?
it's got a whiff of the eucalyptus burning.
Oh, yeah. Smells nice.
It does.
Can you
Yeah.
provide...
Do you know how many comments now are going to pop up in the thing saying you arsonist because we
Arsonist.
both said we could smell that eucalyptus now? You watch it go.
Mate,
Anyway,
we'll get them. We'll get
we'll get them.
We'll go get them.
Wow. Rip torches.
Can you provide recommendations for creating a bushfire emergency plan for families, including evacuation procedures and communication strategies?
Yeah, definitely. This is a big one. This is a huge one. I think everyone should pay attention to. Again, it doesn't matter if you live in a bushfire-prone area. You could live in an apartment in Melbourne, in the CBD. You could be on like the 20th floor of an apartment in a CBD in Melbourne or anywhere else in the country, Sydney, Brisbane, whatever. You should always have an evacuation plan or an emergency plan for you and the people who live with you, regardless of where you are. Doesn't matter. Even when you go camping for a week, you really should think about what's our strategy going to be around about evacuating. I was literally talking to someone the other day. I had someone who come and ask me my advice because every year they go camping up on the Murray River here between New South Wales and Victoria. They go for at least a week. It's always hot when they're up there. They've never really thought about having any kind of fire or evacuation plan whilst they're there. They just assumed they would quickly pack up and follow the track out.
At least they didn't think about jumping in the water.
Well, no, hang on a minute. A part of their plan is if they weren't able to do that, they would jump in the water and just float down river and they'd get out wherever they get out, next sort of town, right?
Okay.
So, in some respects, I can kind of see that might actually work because we've actually had people jump in creeks and rivers before and save themselves. You look at Marysville in 2009, the fires there, the fire brigade actually took people to the river and got them in, and the fire brigade got in the river as well because there was no option left for the town, and it probably saved people. So I'm not saying it's a bad idea. It's just it probably shouldn't be the immediate idea or the immediate thought or plan. But even going away. So we were having a chat because they're really concerned that this year where they go, they know there's a lot of vegetation. They know it's very dry there already, and a lot of vegetation because it was a flooded area over the last couple of years. So they want to go back up, and they're 50-50. They're like, do we actually go? If we do go, we should probably have a plan with everyone we go with because they know lots of people will be there. There's always lots of people there. Or do we just not go at all and find somewhere else this year that makes them feel more comfortable? That's up to them. But I say to them, if you do go, make a plan with the people you're going with. Make a plan. It might sound silly, but it'll take you 5 minutes to discuss the plan at the start of your trip or when you first get there, and then talk to the kids about what the plan is because you may need it. Again, if you're at home, so whole family has to be involved. Not just mum and dad, it's got to be the kids as well. The kids need to know what the plan's going to be for evacuation. And again, the evacuation might be just because their house is on fire in the middle of the night, or it could be because we're going to evacuate for a bushfire, whatever that reason is. Obviously, you need to have plans for those different options. If it's a house fire in the middle of the night, we evacuate, we all meet at the letterbox out the front, versus...
I was going to ask, is that still the requirement?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the most logical one. It's the most logical one.
I was, what was it? It would have been kinder. It was back then they were saying that...
stop, drop and roll. And
stop, drop and roll.
Go to your evacuation point.
Get down low, go. And then always go to the letterbox if your house is on fire.
Yeah, 100%.
Everyone meet there. And I was wondering if that was still the case because now you've got a lot of houses that probably don't have big front yards.
Yeah, well, that's true. And some... You might not have a letterbox if you live in an area where they don't have letterboxes. You might not have a letterbox because your letterbox is at the post office in town, and it's probably not a great place to evacuate to there. Because the reason why they used to say go to your letterbox is because everyone knew where the letterbox is at your house, and when you get there and the fire brigade turn up, you can tell them we're all here, we're all out of the house. So it made it a lot easier for us. We didn't have to then panic about people being stuck in the house or whatever it may be, and it's a communal place for people to sort of meet, I guess. So, that's, you should have a plan that looks at that, because then if you've got the bushfire evacuation plan, that may look differently, because you may be going to get into the car, both cars, or just one car as a family, and then you're going to go down particular roads and head to a particular location that's, your chosen evacuation spot, so into town, whatever it may be. So you've got to work through those things, but you've got to have the kids involved as well. They need to know what that is, because You may not be home when this emergency takes place. The parents may not be home. The kids might be old enough to look after themselves, and you haven't taught them this process, and then so they panic when they don't know what the plan is. Where if they had that plan and every year you rehearse that plan, a couple of times a year you rehearse the plan or talk about it, it's up here. Hopefully they'll remember it when things start to go wrong. So you definitely want to have that sort of plan. If you are going to be evacuating because of a bushfire, you need to have that conversation again. When you have a look at your plan, what's your trigger going to be? When do you plan on leaving or evacuating your home and going into town? Is it, is it the morning of a total fire ban day? Is it, if we get to a certain risk rating, is that always going to be that we're just not here on those particular risk ratings? Do you wait till it becomes a TFB, then you say we're going to leave? It might be severe, but it's not a TFB. Unlikely, or I think it's extreme now because we changed all the little clocky things around, so it's extreme. It's probably going to be a total fire ban, but let's just say for whatever reason it's not a total fire ban, it's extreme. Is that your trigger, or is it extreme and a total fire ban, that's your trigger? Where do we go? If you are leaving the morning of, where do you go? All that sort of stuff. Is your trigger that we wait until we get an alert to say we need to evacuate because there is a fire now coming and we should be leaving with everybody else, or watch an act leave now, or an emergency leave now, whatever it may be, or a prepared evacuate message, whatever the messages they give you, is that going to be your trigger point? If you have those trigger points, you also have to have the trigger point, or you need to put into your plan, what if that fire starts really close to us and we can't evacuate? Like if our plan is normally to wait till we get that message, but now that fire started really close and we can't evacuate, and the fire services through their message, or the emergency service through their message, is saying you need to stay in shelter indoors. What does that look like for your family? So that should be in your plan as well. What's the best room for you to be in? How are you going to defend your house potentially? Are you filling up the bath and every sink in your house with water so you can then use buckets or whatever to put fires out later on in case you lose water? All those sorts of things. So you want to have all that stuff put into your plan. And again, nearly every emergency service in the country has documentation or booklets that can help you plan for these things. One of the things a lot of people don't think about, and this is one of the key ones I think everybody should think about, and you should do it regardless of where you live. This is a good one for high-rise building or suburban or country, wherever, it doesn't matter where it is. And it's another good one if you're a person who does go away for long periods during summer, okay? USB or a hard drive with everything that you need on it. Birth certificates, photos, insurance documentation, lawyers, wills, all these things. I think I said photographs, but photos of your kids, all that sort of stuff on a hard drive that is kept in a fireproof safe. So if you happen to be at work and a fire comes through your town or your area and you're not home to defend your house and you're not home to take that's got all the important stuff on it, but your house burns down, that fireproof safe that you can buy from Bunnings, which are about $100, maybe $200 at Bunnings, and they're pretty bloody good little safes. You put in your house somewhere, and if that hard drive is the only thing that goes in there that has all that stuff on it, a couple of days down the track when you're allowed to go back in to your house and you can pick through the ruins, unfortunately, that safe will hopefully be there. You can access that safe, pull out that hard drive, you have birth certificates, you have passport information, you've got your driver's license information, and you've got all your insurance documents, all your photos that were in your house that you've now lost, they're all on that hard drive. You can get all that stuff back again. Because the biggest thing that I have seen from an emotional loss perspective during any emergency, particularly fires, but it happens with floods and all those sorts of things as well. But I've seen it most, I guess, during fire, is people always say to me, they're absolutely devastated that they've lost their house because of all the memories that are there. And you talk to these people, and it's not, I very quickly come to the conclusion every single time, there's memories of the actual house itself, all right? My house where I live now, my youngest daughter, that's the house she came home to. That's the house she's always grown up in. So there's memories there that, if we lose that house now, it's going to be sad because it's not going to be the same. You rebuild it, it's not going to be the same. So you do lose those memories. But what is worse for these people is when they realise they've just lost the one thing that probably kept that memory was all their photographs. All the photographs of their kids, their kids' artwork through school, their parents, grandparents, all these sorts of things. They don't have them anymore. They're gone. And can they get them all back? Probably not, because they might be able to go to a sibling or a mother or a father or a grandparent and say, hey, do you still have that, do you have a copy of that photo of me when I was sitting on your lap when I was turning 3? Like, yeah, I've got it. Fantastic. But what about all the photos that other people don't have access to, that you took yourself? That, yep, granted, we don't often print photos out these days because all of our photos are on our phones. But some people do still print out photos and whatever it may be. And you may have photos like I've got in my house. I've got a ton of our family's photos, literally boxes of them, that were taken before phones were a thing. It's all film-based. They're all just sitting there. I've scanned a number of them already and put them on a hard drive, but I've got a lot more to do yet. If they go, I don't have that anymore. It's completely gone. So it's those sorts of things that you want to be able to try and keep from a memory perspective. When it comes to your passports, your driver's license, your insurance documents, all those sorts of things, they're really important because you ring the insurance company and go, look, my policy number was this for my house. And they can very easily find it for you and start providing you the assistance you need. If your passports are lost, having the scanned copy of it, you can at least, you can show potentially people so you can confirm your identity. Why have your driver's license scanned? Because it should be in your wallet or whatever. Yeah, 100% it should be. Or it's where it normally lives, I guess, for a lot of people, your purse or your wallet. But what if that fire happens really quickly and you didn't get time to evacuate and you are there and then your house does burn down, you survive, but you watch your house burn down and your wallet's inside, which happens all the time. You now don't have any proof of ID. So just having those things is really, really important to have on a hard drive potentially in a fireproof safe. The thing with the hard drive is then if you do happen to go away in a summer period for 2, 3, 4 weeks, whatever it may be, you can take that hard drive with you. Or maybe you can give that hard drive to somebody else who's another family member who lives somewhere else if that's what you want to do. That way, if you are away and your house burns down and maybe you don't have a fireproof safe, but if your house does burn down, you've still got that hard drive of all the really important stuff that you need on it. So to me, that's a really big one. And on that hard drive, I would also suggest that's probably the hard drive where you store all of your written communication about what your fire plans are, your evacuation plans, or whatever your emergency plans are for your property, for flood, for fire, for storm, for everything. Keep it on that hard drive as well, because then it's just all there anyway, regardless. And that hard drive becomes that's like your emergency go-to piece of equipment, I suppose. The other thing to remember, I guess, in that sense, with your evacuation and stuff like that, having a kit with masks in it, fire blankets, torches, a little bit of food, bottles of water for drinking, not for fighting fires, but for drinking, for dehydration, having those sorts of things in a kit that you can easily grab. So if you are evacuating, you can grab it. It's got some bits and pieces in there for you for the next couple of hours. If you happen to decide to stay and defend your home because you think you can do it, and that's a decision you make, if you do happen to lose stuff, you've got that box with you with the bits and pieces in it. If, as has happened before, and it will happen again because it's just the nature of the emergencies, the natural disaster type emergencies that we get, be it floods or fire, if you get cut off from civilization for a couple of days, you've got stuff there. You've got food, drinking water. And when I say drinking water, I'm talking like, maybe get a slab or two that you put aside and go, don't touch that. That's our emergency rations, and have literally emergency rations that you can get through every year with, and you have enough to, maybe last you 4 or 5 days. So if something does go wrong, you've at least got some things you can eat. You can keep yourselves motivated, eating, drinking, until you get contact with civilization again before helicopters can start dropping stuff to you or whatever it may be.
Yep.
So that should also be in your plan. Those things should not be forgotten about. That's probably about it, really.
And then the last question. How can technology and early warning systems assist homeowners in staying informed and prepared for approaching bushfires?
I think, these days, they're very good and very, very useful. Technology obviously is advancing every single day, literally every second of every day. Technology is advancing and new things are coming out. AI is, obviously becoming really big these days, and AI is starting to prove that it's very capable in the emergency response and management phase already. So there's some systems they're using around the world now to help detect fires in their early stages in really wilderness areas where we don't have fire towers and things like that. So, that sort of stuff's coming along, and it's really good. Obviously, following the 2009 bushfires here in Victoria, every state, the one recommendation probably everybody followed was to start looking at warnings on phones, because everyone's got them these days, and we can push those warnings out, and we push them out early, and it's been happening. It's been very busy already in the last few weeks with warnings going out constantly in particular areas where they needed to be. So I think it's really good in that sense. It's helping people get early warnings of bushfires. It's helping people get notified of when they have got dangerous fire conditions coming up in a day or two, whatever it may be, if it is pushed out via that warning system potentially. So it's really good in that sense. It's good for helping you track your weather and stuff like that on a day, but if you are at home and your plan is to stay at home and defend if there was a fire, you can use technology these days to track the weather and see if things are actually getting worse than what you thought they were. Most of the fire agencies these days have an incident page where, again, via technology, you can go on there and you can see what fires are in the area. So if you do see smoke in the distance, you can generally kind of pinpoint roughly where it is. It will generally tell you what road that fire's on, so you can look at it and think about, okay, if I need to start monitoring this fire, it might be 20 Ks away, 20, 30 Ks away, but with the conditions we've got today and tomorrow, maybe I shouldn't be here anymore. So it can allow you to make those decisions if things do start to happen. So I think it's really good. I don't have a problem with it. Where I do have a bit of a concern with it, and this is something that I think all of the agencies, and I think everybody's aware of, and I know they have these conversations regularly, is the overuse of that technology. And getting to a point where people get sick of it and therefore they don't want to use it or they won't use it. And then we go back to where we were, 2009, pre-2009, back into the 80s, all those sorts of times where communities, every time we had a fire and we had inquiries and recommendations, there was no early warning. We didn't know these things were happening. So we've got to be careful that we don't overstep the mark to the point where people get sick of these messages and think this is just bullshit. You're just putting these out all the time and it's not helping anybody. So we don't want to sort of see that happening. Again, using technology and devices that we've had for years, there's been advancements. Again, I guess here in Victoria, we changed policy procedure. So most fire stations, when they were originally built, had the audible fire siren that would go off when we got fire calls. They operated for a long time in towns. Then unfortunately people started to complain about those sirens, so they got removed from fire stations. Following, not all fire stations, but many fire stations, their sirens were removed. Now, those sirens have now become really important to communities because they've now made decisions that, if you hear a fire, I think it's, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, either yourself or anyone out there who, I might get this wrong, but I think from a CFA perspective here in Victoria, if the fire siren sounds for 90 seconds in a town, it's just letting the town know that the fire brigade is responding to an emergency. There is an emergency, we are responding to it, and it's also a way of letting the firefighters know, even though they've mainly got phones and pages and stuff that tell them these days, but it is a way of letting them know again that there is a fire or an emergency taking place. But lets the town know as well, switch on, you might see emergency vehicles shortly. That's 90 seconds. If those sirens in those towns go for 5 minutes, continuous for 5 minutes, that is the emergency services telling that town that there is an impending emergency that is threatening that community.
Okay.
And that you need to switch on and pay attention. You need to be looking at your phone or talking to people and finding out what that emergency is and finding out what you need to do. It's literally, if it's a 5 minutes continuous siren, it's telling you there is a problem that is affecting you. You need to start getting advice and knowledge now and acting immediately. So I think that's great. We need to get more sirens into towns because we did remove those sirens from a lot of towns. So we need to get them back in there where we can. But yeah, and I think we will have a lot more advancement in technology as it comes. My only fear with technology always is and always will be, and I know that there's many people who understand this, and when we try in our training and our operations, is we try not to rely too heavily on technology. We still need to rely on our instincts, and we need to rely on what we know about fire and science and emergency, not just fire, but we know things about weather. We can look at the clouds and the sky and the wind, and we know what's happening purely by looking at it, because we're trained to do so. We need to keep teaching those things and not relying on technology, because again, during major fires or major emergencies, we see technology get lost. We see towers go down and we don't have access to phones, and we don't have, whatever it may be. Again, lots of work done in that space over the last few years, and it's much better now, but it can still happen, and we therefore need to be reliant on other forms of communication to talk. So things like phone trees and stuff like that are still really important. Phone trees within communities, Fireguard group, phone trees and all that sort of stuff. All that stuff's still really, really important. That's old school sort of way of doing things. Still really important. Still should be practiced. Still should be taught, because we may still need it, when things happen.
Beautiful. Well, that brings us to the end of this episode.
Yay.
I don't think you had anything else to.
No, not really. I just think people need to be preparing, well and truly preparing now, getting things done. I'm still preparing around my property. I've been doing it for a couple of weeks now, and I've got a little bit more to go yet.
Yeah.
But because we're pretty green where we are at the moment, it's not too bad, but it is getting there. Certainly where we are today, it's green, but there's also some dry patches. Yeah. So we know it's coming and going. We've had a bit of, here in Victoria, and I think New South Wales got the bit as well, we've had a bit of rain over the last week. It's going to settle things down again for a little bit.
Yep.
But it's also going to provide growth as well. Some areas of Victoria are still fairly saturated from the last couple of years, and they won't be as a bigger fire risk than other areas. Other areas we're drying out really quickly, and we've had issues. We look at Gippsland. Gippsland were very dry. We had the fires there last weekend as we were recording, and then the following couple of days was really bad down there. We lost some structures and I'm not sure we actually lost houses, but we had damage to houses, definitely lost structures, lots of vegetation, lots of emergency warnings, very erratic fire behaviour. It was almost the sort of stuff you would see halfway through a fire season.
Yeah.
So that was a bit of indication about things we need to pay attention to. Now they're flooded down there. So, those fires predominantly got, the fire service was doing a great job, but the rain certainly helped them get on top of those fires. But the last couple of days, they've been showing that those fires are, there is some major hot spots on the edges of those fires that they're trying to deal with now. That rain came in, but it quietened everything down. They got on top of it, but it's now. We're now getting sun again. The next week we've got sun all week pretty much. I think it's going to be 26 or 28 on Wednesday. And the models would probably are showing that there's not much rain coming now. It's kind of, starting to disappear again, and El Nino is really starting to take effect. So, it's literally going to be a roll the dice season. We're either going to have a really busy fire season that could be quite destructive, or we're going to have what we would say would have been a normal fire season the last few years. If we didn't have the rain, it might just be a normal fire season, in which case, we still need to prepare, because you don't know if it's going to be your town or your area that gets hit this year. So you need to be ready to go, and you need to start now, because if we keep getting, with the rain we've had and now we've got sun, we're going to get more growth. So we need to get that stuff done, because eventually we're not going to see that rain anymore, and the growth may stop, but the drying out's going to happen very quickly. So we need to be onto it now, get ready to go. So that's probably my last really comment for people is get onto it now. Don't wait any longer.
Get on the Google. Get on the Google and type in fire protection.
Yeah, just make sure you look for Australia.
Yeah.
Don't go looking at stuff overseas. I'm not saying it's wrong, but there's different vegetations, different way that our weather behaves. Here a northerly wind in Australia is really, really crucial in firefighting aspect. It's very dangerous when we have northerly winds. You look at other parts of the world and it's a southerly wind that's really dangerous to them, or an easterly wind. So make sure if you Google, you're looking for Australian bushfire plans or Australian bushfire fire management type tools and things like that. Be very specific to Australia, because that's what you need to be gathering the evidence on.
Thank you very much for your insight for this time.
No worries, mate.
This episode.
Anytime.
This has been The Staging Area, episode 14. You can get in touch with us at tsa@militum.com.au, on Facebook, The Staging Area, Militum Productions on Instagram and TikTok. Get your podcasts at YouTube, Rumble, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts and Spotify. I had to write it down after last week.
I was going to say, you're very good. This was very, very fluent this
Remember,
week.
This is what happens when you're on the ball and you create a running sheet. So,
We're still learning.
that's it from us this week. I've been Hayden Mack. That has been Simon Roy Lance.
See you later, people. Stay
Hooroo.
safe. Enjoy.